Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all and thanking you for joining us both here at Trek and for the folks that have joined us virtually. You're in for a treat. Thank you to Trek for hosting, to Pat and Roscoe for the partnership with Niagara University's College of Business, who I represent, and most importantly to our panelists for their time and their willingness to come be with us this evening, share a little bit of their expertise and their many lessons learned about leadership. As I said, I'm joining you on behalf of the College of Business Administration, representing our Dean and Associate Dean and our students. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Operations for our MBA program, as well as our Masters of Science in Finance. We have about 180 students this year, and we have 8 concentrations in our MBA and are looking to bring new business leaders and professionals into our cohort for the spring. We have accessible scheduling, Saturday evening and online formats, and our average time to complete the program is 15 to 18 months. So we would love to welcome any of you in the audience if you're interested in thinking about your future and accelerating your career within an MBA program. I'd love to have a conversation with you, and we'll make sure to put some info in the chat. And the reason for us being here tonight really is to welcome our students as well. Some of our graduate students have been engaged with Trek here, learning about the community of business opportunities and also engaging with professionals in their future careers and or their current, and also thinking about projects within this community to really impact, to also think about internships and jobs as they move forward in their professional life. And also Trek has been very generous in enabling our students to have free access to the space here where they can meet and mix and mingle and also engage with projects as business leaders come and they get acquainted and connected. So this Guide Talk series is the first. We're going to be talking tonight a little bit about following. The theme of our series is real people, honest conversations. And I know everybody who's here tonight is just that, experiential learning. Many of these individuals have navigated some challenging career segues, relationships, decisions. Again, thinking about how do we as business professionals leverage some of those intangibles and share those topics with individuals in their careers as we all face especially challenging times now with COVID. So thank you so much to our panelists for your candor and your time. A couple of housekeeping things for the virtual audience. If you have questions, we will have a virtual moderation. So please add your questions to the chat. We're gonna take all those questions at the end after the panel. So thank you again for joining us. I look forward to connecting, and now over to Pat.
Hey. And thanks to the College of Business Administration for your partnership. We're thrilled to be co-hosting this with you and Trek. It's good to see people in the place, and we're thankful for the people joining us online. We went through some housekeeping in the building, but for those of you online, I think Whitney's covered them. So raise your hand during the Q&A time if you have a question, but if you have one before, then put it in the chat. We have somebody moderating the chat so they can get the questions to us. And I want to remind you that this is being recorded and will be posted on the Trek YouTube channel. So I'm going to add on a little bit to what Whitney said about tonight's program, following versus leading. And I think everybody, if you think about it, you hear all the time about all kinds of seminars and things about leading. There's an awful lot of coaching available for learning how to lead, but very little. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard of a seminar on following. So we're going to talk about following tonight, and it seems to be ironic when you think about the numbers. If you have a company with 100 people in there, typically that company has one leader and 99 followers. But we teach leadership, but we don't teach following. And how are we going to have leaders move up if we don't have good followers? So that's kind of the thinking behind this. I want to talk first about my story. I work for UPS where, there's 480,000 employees. So you might wait a long time before you become a leader. Although UPS has an interesting culture in that the president, until this current president and CEO, every single predecessor to the current president and CEO of UPS started as a driver. So it was an interesting place to work because if you were in Niagara Falls, New York, at the UPS building and the president and CEO walked in, nobody was going to fool the president and CEO of UPS because the president and CEO of UPS was a driver before. So everybody had the chance actually to advance and stop being a follower and being a leader and be named CEO of UPS. But I, after 13 years there at UPS, a wonderful career, I decided that I wanted to lead. And I quit my job and I started my own business. And I can tell you that although I was the boss, because I started the business and I had quite a few employees, I was not the leader. And the reason I wasn't the leader is because nobody was following me. For the first 6 years of that company's existence, we did fine. But I had constant turnover, I was constantly training new people. And the reason for that was because I just wasn't a good leader. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that story. Luckily I had an epiphany in the 6th year and decided that it wasn't about me, it was about the employees, and really turned that business around. And even though we had been growing for 6 years, we really hit the accelerator after 6 years. And just to wrap it up, it has nothing to do with tonight's content, but 9 years after that, UPS bought the company. And I went back to work for UPS for 2 years, but that's for another night. We have great panelists tonight, and one of the common denominators in our panelists is that they, like everyone else that's a leader in the world, they weren't born, except maybe North Korea, they were not born to be the leader. You have to work your way up, and in my case again, I made myself the president of the company that I started, and I still wasn't the leader. So you have to earn the stripes, and I think the leaders that we have today are going to talk, I hope, about their own experiences to get there. And I'm going to start by asking each one of them to introduce themselves rather than me introduce them. I'd like for them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about when they were a follower before they became a leader, basically their progression through their career to where they are today. And Mike will start. Mark Glory, Superintendent of Niagara Falls Schools.
Thanks for the applause. Hi. So, a couple of things that, am I speaking loud enough? Right. So a couple of things, that your story is kind of close to my heart. And thank you for having me here. And certainly, we learn from each other, because we only know what we know, we don't know what we don't know, right? So I learned that right away. So maybe I can tell you quickly about my story. It's somewhat like yours, Pat. I graduated from Niagara University with a degree in political science. Had no idea what I was going to do with that. Wear a lab coat and walk around, I don't know what you do, right? Well, you go to law school. Went to law school for about 3 weeks, and I'm on the thruway, and I'm ready to drive off the side of the road because I couldn't stand going there. I just couldn't stand it. I'm like, I can't do this. Never in my life. We were always taught as a family, whatever you start, you finish, right? Parents say that, you start, you want to play Little League, you got to finish. You don't like it, you start and you finish it. And I felt like I'm a college graduate and I'm going to go to law school, and I hated it. It's not what I wanted to do. So I made a huge decision to stop going. And then I found myself unemployed for So my father was an educator, and they had just started these positions, these associate positions called in-school suspension. I'm sure Bobby was never in the school suspension or any of you here, but I was the first in-school suspension room person in Niagara Falls, along with the gentleman named Bill Duff, who's since passed. I don't know if you know Bill Duff. And I had never been in a school since I left school. I got there and I absolutely loved being back in the school. It was Gaskill. I just loved it. I loved it. I went into the faculty room. I learned how to play cards. The things that they did in the faculty room when I first started, you can't believe. It was all men. They smoked and played cards. And I was, wow, this is great. I didn't do any of those things except for being a man, but I loved it. And I said, I gotta get more of this. So I went back to school, became a special education teacher, third grade teacher, and I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. But like you talking about UPS, as an aide, I started as an aide, a teacher, a dean, assistant principal, principal. I'd done most of the jobs in the school district, starting with an aide. But where I discovered that I could not be a follower and be happy was another time when I went into a faculty room in one of the schools. And I noticed that people were complaining. People were complaining in the faculty, this wasn't right, this wasn't right. And I had I wouldn't say it's an epiphany, but to me it was. I decided that I was either going to never complain, ever complain, or ascend to a leadership position where I could make a change or make a difference. But I wasn't going to sit in the faculty room and complain. That's not how I was raised, that's not in my makeup. I'm either going to fix it or just like where I'm at. So I decided to go back, get my administrative degree. I had the good fortune of having a lot of great mentors who I learned from, and that's a really important thing about being a leader, right? You've got to have multiple mentors. I don't care what business you're in. You can't have one mentor, because if I always went to the same mentor, I get the same answer, but for a different situation, you'd want to have a different mentor. So I had to distinguish between which mentor was right for the situation I was asking. And I just loved my ascent at every stop. I also had the pleasure of working at every level, elementary, middle schools, high school. Every time I was elementary, I never want to leave here. I love being an elementary principal. Then I went to middle school. I love being in middle school. Then I went to high school. I never want to leave here, high school. I love being the high school principal. And then I went to central office. And now I love being central. I love being here. Like Bobby and I were just talking, I'm kind of distant from kids. So I'll start every day by going into a school and walking through and getting to see some kids to keep them grounded and what I'm really supposed to be about. So with respect to being a leader and being a follower, I decided at that point, I'm either going to be in charge with people or I'm not going to say a word. There's nothing worse than not being part of the solution. The last thing I'll tell you is as a leader, I want everybody on our team to give me their honest opinion about what's going on, always. And I work with good leaders and not so good leaders. And I think I've learned just as much by saying, I'm not ever going to do what he just did, ever, and writing that down, versus I like what he's doing and I'm going to do that. So having multiple mentors, having worked for multiple leaders, the expectation for anybody, I don't see them as followers, because it's not the power of your position, it's the influence of your ideas. So what I try to tell everybody who's with me is whoever, I don't care if it's the cook, it's the cleaner, it's the principal, or whoever's got the best idea, I'm taking it. I don't care where you sit. I'm going to take your idea, no matter what you say. So I think you can open my mind in knowing it's the power of it's the influence of your idea, not the power of your position. And if you get stuck in the power of your position, you're not going to be a very good leader. So I try to listen to everyone. And that's why I try to go to the school as a superintendent, because that's where the real work happens, not in some central office. So I try to get out as much as I can. So I want people to, my internal team, to share what they think. But when we come out of the room, we come out of the room together and expect loyalty and work together. Does that satisfy the question? And
Yes, it does. Thank you. That's
you're
great.
welcome.
So management by walking around, I like that. It's one of the things I changed. after my 6th year in my own business. And once I was out with the people that did the jobs, I just had another report. Get arrested, Bobby.
Yes.
It's you're there. You management will walk around because the only way you're not is if you're stuck behind in the back of the house and don't go out the front of the house. But tell us about your story, because I'm sure you didn't start out as an executive chef.
No. I'm probably the least qualified candidate on this panel here as leadership, right? When I look at, you two guys as mentorship. I do business with Superintendent Lori, and I remember being frantic. My panic is just normal. And I was just like, let's get together and share some pain. Because there's not a lot of people to understand that, what you go through as being a leader. Everybody sees the glory part of it. My situation, my story is way different. I dropped out of 12th grade in May. I had 1 more month. I went to New York City to become a rapper. And I quickly failed at that. I came home in 3 weeks and ended up finishing. When I came home to Niagara Falls, this was in 1987, I needed a job or I was going to the streets, per se. I never forget this lovely lady. She was also from that university. Her name is Captain Train. And she hired me for the first hospitality hotel job. And she gave me an option. She said, what do you want to be? You want to be a dishwasher or a busboy? I didn't have to wait the busboy sound. I was like, yeah, I'd be a dishwasher. Like that was a more glorious position. So for years, I started this business at a tender age of 1987. This city was booming. We had the Festival of Lights. I worked all year round. Those was the good old days, Canadian traffic. And I was getting kicked around in those restaurants in those days. But I never forget what I had to learn on early on in my process of moving up, becoming a leader. I had to learn how to fit in. I wasn't good at fit in because where I'm from, you had to have this kind of ego. You had to have this kind of macho. So I had to learn how to fit in to stand out. And I thought you had to stand out first, and then everybody else would fit in. And it was reversed for me. And so I quickly learned as leadership goes, is that leadership starts in the back and they work their way up to the front. And my story is real simple. I started out cooking. I wanted to make someone else look amazing. And I became amazing making someone else look amazing. I didn't even know I was executive chef when I had the position. I just knew I was doing the chef's duties. But all I wanted to do is make my chef look amazing. And hence, I became amazing, making him look amazing. And before I know it, I was in all these management jobs. But I quickly found out that being a chef and a cook was two different Bibles. To me, the CEO and the janitor have the same job. And my job was to mop up spills, to clean up spills. It wasn't no more cooking involved. It wasn't no more making a recipe. It was cleaning up the spills. And I had to quickly learn that some of the pain that I experienced as going up the ladder, the same pain it was the poem. It was the promise for my career. And I couldn't avoid that. So years in the business, years later, I was fortunate enough to work my way out of poverty, out of Niagara Falls. And I worked my way into some of the fanciest places. And being the only Black chef in some of these country clubs, being the Black chef as the head of an Italian restaurant, they didn't even know they had a Black chef at Mir Nachos for 5 years. That was me, right? And I had to learn how to stay humble and keep my eye on the prize. And so becoming a leader for me was much, much more than being an executive chef. I realized it was about the people around me. And I used to call myself like, I was a people's person that kind of didn't like people. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So I ended up doing really, really well in the city. And then I really met some people that really took an interest into my career. I ended up working with Gordon Ramsay, and at that time, he was the richest chef in America. And when I worked with him, he took me to London, and I'll never forget this, and changed the course of my whole trajectory of my whole life. He said, he looked me in my eye and said, Bobby, you can participate in the real American dream. You have leadership skills. And all I needed was that one person to believe in me. And and I went back that day in that kitchen in London, and it was the metric system. It was fast, it was hot, and I stood at a turning point. Am I gonna proceed forward, or I'm gonna waddle back and go back to night across New York? And I think that's what really made my career catapult to a different level. So me as a founder now, fast forward, of a nonprofit, I stumbled into a restaurant. So I realized real quick early on that the nonprofit had to profit for the nonprofit to profit. That makes sense to you, right?
Yeah.
So you had to run this thing almost like a for-profit business. So me as the owner, as the founder, I realized it had nothing to do with me. And I realized what some people see as overnight success, took me 15 years. So, congratulations for someone says overnight success, because they didn't see. And I like to talk about along the way, like the pain along the way that most people, Steve Jobs like to describe it as the pain of success. It almost reminded me of the same neighborhood that I was running from. And your brain will rationalize that and say, who wants that? Go get a job, go back to work. What are you doing? And that's what some of the cost of wanting to become self-sufficient and wanting to become this entrepreneur. So fast track it now, we have different outlets that we do with restaurants. We have different, meaning the company F-Bites, right? So we have different restaurants, we have different organizations that we teach these amazing soft skills. We have relationships with Superintendent Lori. We have relationships with Pat Whalen. We do things for free. We go around the country and try to look at the destruction of it, and then we run to it. So we're no longer, as a leader, I'm no longer forced to look at things in a fearful type of way. So my job is to figure out the solution of it. So I think that's enough about me, right?
Thanks, Bobby. I know Natalie's in transition, but another not-for-profit leader, and let's hear about what you've been doing and what your new job will be and how you became the leader.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for asking me to be here. One thing I want to say before I start with myself is both Mark, well, actually everybody, I just met Joe today, but I could already tell that if I had known you longer, whenever I leave a room with all three of these people, and I will include Joe now, I always feel better about myself. So I want to say, although we're here as leaders today, I can tell you that when I'm with you, yes, you're leaders, but you always make people feel good. So I just want to say that it's an important leadership skill myself. So I just live my story. And I'm the leader of my own story, right? I wasn't sure how I was going to talk about myself. So as I'm listening to everybody, it was really just real talk. So thanks for the reminder. I guess I'm a child of an ACOA, so that's an adult child of an alcoholic. And then I also have a mother that really suffers from PTSD. She had a traumatic experience, very traumatic experience with the death of 3 of her children and her husband before she married my father. So I have had to, and very loving parents when they married each other, everything was, it was as good as it could be. And my sister and I had to figure out real quickly how to feel real purposeful and have leadership within our lives, because there was so much really broken in the immediate household. Wonderful family supports on the outside, and I have had amazing support and friendships throughout my life, including people that sit here up on the panel. So leadership really started for myself when I was little and in the home and through the tragedies. So I get through high school, I played sports, I buried myself in all of the opportunities that education offered me when I was in high school. So, we sit here and we think about COVID right now, and I know my outlet was my sports and my coaches. And those were the people I followed, because they are the ones that really took me by the hand and said, hey, this kid, you could be something, you know? I was rough around the edges at times, you know, Clark can attest to that. I question systems. I'm more of an risk taker, much more entrepreneurial, as Bobby is also. And there's pain to being an entrepreneurial thinker. A lot of people don't understand you. So I get to college, I go to the C word, sorry, and I remember saying I went to Canisius. They always say the C word, don't say it. But I go to Canisius for my undergrad, no clue what I want to do. I tell my mom the entire time, I just want to train dolphins. Doesn't that sound like a happy thing? Just let me train dolphins. She goes, if you go into the advisor at this $30,000 school and you tell them you want to train dolphins, I'm going to kill you. So I sit there. I want to train dolphins, Dr. Noonan.
Oh.
He's like, well, then you don't even be here.
Yeah.
He's like, you can go to Marineland right now. Do you know somebody? Because the list is about 1,000 people long. And I'm like, know somebody? Okay. So I was like, fine, I'll pick something. I like science, I'll go pre-med. Right? So I get into the pre-med and I'm sitting there and I'm like, the first day of class, right? He's like, well, not everybody's gonna make it and someone's smarter than you and blah, blah. I'm like, oh dear. I'm like, this is pretty intimidating. And I also knew in my mind that I wanted to be a mother. And I wanted to have a family. When I was a mom, I wanted to stay home with the kids. So I was like, so am I gonna invest all this in pre-med and then stay home with my family? Like, these are things I literally am weighing, right? So I become a teacher. I take the science, become a science teacher and start teaching in the school system. Well, the second year is all it took when I was driving to the school, parking in the same spot, teaching the subjects again, going through the modules again. I was like, I don't think I can do this repetition for the rest of my life. Like, I need a little bit of a mix-up. It got to be a little bit, I was good at what I did. I connected with youth. I wanted to give back. You know, what I noticed was I was connecting with the at-risk youth, which stands to reason because that's how I really grew up. That's my story. So I said, okay, I'm gonna follow what I'm clearly naturally innately good at, which is connecting with people that hurt. So I become a school counselor. And school counseling allowed me to go, sorry, Canisius again, but my school counseling degree allowed me to do various tasks throughout the day, which kept my mind and myself happier than just doing the same thing and rewind the next year. It felt like Groundhog's Day as a teacher, but so thank you for the teachers that could do that. And now the story is funny because every job I've had since I was at Niagara Catholic as a school counselor, and then every job I've had thereafter, the company has like shut down. So I don't know, I'm not like black widow, I don't know. So Niagara Catholic closes, so I bounce out, and I get this bite. I go to Leadership Niagara. You know, before I ended, Niagara Catholic sent me to Leadership Niagara, and I have to say, when I was there, I really increased my sense of self and my courage to take my entrepreneurial thoughts, my ability and willingness to want to take risks and put it into action. So my network grew, people were confident in me, and I was following great people and a great, you know, you look at leadership and followership, I think it's a toggle. I don't know if I'm a leader, I know I follow and I lead. It's really an oscillation, right? Knowing when to oscillate. So I start working in a nonprofit, and that one closes, and it's really, I stay within the educational workforce development nonprofit wheel is where I really ended up. So it was Isaiah 61, well, Indigo first, and that was in education. The cool thing about Indigo is I end up starting my own company from Indigo. So I do work for somebody, and I do have my own company right now. I just don't have a lot of time and attention to give it. There's where my entrepreneurship is being fed, and there's where I am, really, I don't have anybody to follow me right now, so the same boat as you, Pat, when you started out, I can't call myself a leader there. Mark was nice enough to have me come into Niagara Falls High School and talk to him about Indigo, and I really look at the educational system and want to really envelope it more with emotional intelligence. I really think we need to do that. It needs to be a paradigm shift. We can do all IQ in the world we want, but we can clearly see that our communication skills are struggling and we don't know the strengths of humans anymore, and that would be ideal. So that's my company now. But the reality is that doesn't pay the bills, and education isn't ready for it. And Mark can tell you, Mark likes what I have, but he can't put it in his school. They're just not ready for it within the standardization of what he's handed from from the standardizations that come down from the top. They're not really infusing emotional intelligence, you know, that's almost like an after school, which I would be very welcome to do. So that's my private company, and then what I do is I'm really a manager at Casanova Recovery, and I do workforce development with people with addictions. And again, clearly my walk of life has led me to that career as well, and the ability to lead within this system. I also follow. I mean, it's really, like I said, it's an oscillation between the two. You really have to know, and it is influential. Mark, if I was to pick a definition of leadership, it's how well you influence people to get them to attain a goal. You know, you have to have a shared goal, you have to have a plan. Without a plan, you plan to fail. And then you have to execute on that goal, and your influence is what's going to help you attain that goal. And giving people credit where the credit is due. When I go to leadership dinners, I'm always thinking to myself, well, really, it should be everybody else but the person up there getting the credit half the time. Because we all know who's really executing on the plan, right? It's rarely the leader. They're keeping the influence in the company culture at a high level. So that's a little bit of my story. I'm going to be heading to the Buffalo City Mission next, and I'll be the vocational educational manager at their department that's now ready. And there's a plan, and I'm really excited to venture over there and do the nonprofit work there.
And that starts?
That starts November 20th, will be my first day. November 20th.
Okay, so Joe, I'm gonna say that you probably have grown up in a place with more structure than the rest of us. The military, so what I like to say is it doesn't matter if you go to West Point, you're not coming out of West Point being the devil, you're gonna have to work your way out. I'd like you to tell us about how that works in the military.
Right, so again, thank you for inviting me here. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to speak. So my name is Joe Murillo. I'm a major in the United States Army. Next month will make 20 years of active duty federal service. My background is a military police officer, but I'm currently serving at Niagara University's ROTC program as a professor of military science. And just like you said, sir, I didn't walk in as a major. I actually started with 0 rank. I was at the bottom. I had no rank on my chest at all. My brother and I joined the Army. We were predominantly an Air Force family. Everybody on our side joined the Air Force, and my brother and I, without telling our parents, went and signed up down at the mall and came back and had some news from my father. And he said, with the drill sergeants and the push-ups, and I said, yep, we're leaving in a few weeks. But starting at the bottom, you know, we had to learn, and we had to learn fast. And I've served in duty stations across the globe, overseas, moved up the ranks through the enlisted ranks, went through ROTC myself, became an officer, deployed to Iraq when the war started in 03, again in 05, and then served in Kandahar in 2010. And just great people, lifelong friends. I tell the cadets that I teach, you know, it's the greatest team sport out there, serving in the military. And one of the biggest lessons I learned coming up through the ranks is that you become the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Right, so those 5 people that you spend the most time with, you're going to become that person, an average of that person. So coming up through the ranks, I had to decide what kind of company am I going to keep, right? What are those leaders I'm aspiring to be like? What are they reading? Who are their mentors? What are they studying? And just those leaders that have that direct influence over those soldiers. And how can I be like them? So that's one lesson that I always kept in mind, and I keep to my mind this day. Like, just make sure you're keeping with the company you want to be like, because that's who you're going to end up.
Whenever I go to something like this, I try to take at least one thing away. Thanks, Joe.
I wrote that down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna claim it.
Yeah.
So, thanks, Joe. It's all, I don't know if everybody here is going to have a comment on this, but I really want to talk about cultural conflicts. If you are in an organization and you're following, and you don't like what you're following, what have you done to change, find another leader to follow, or change careers, or change employers? And again, I'm going to go back to my UPS story to start. And when I started at UPS, I loaded trucks for 30 days, and after 30 days, I had to join the union, but 30 days in, there's two guys in white shirts watching me load the trucks. The union wanted $350 to join the union, and these two guys said to me, "We've been watching you work. You seem to be a hard worker. Your boss says you caught on to our system pretty well. Would you like to go into management?" And I said, "What does that cost?" They said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, it costs $350 to go in the union. What's it cost to go into management?" I said, "Oh, they." But one guy literally fell over, doubled over, was laughing so hard. That guy's name was Bud Yard. Budyard, Bud Yard. And we hit it off right then and there. I went into management to save $350. And Bud at the time was a delivery supervisor. He had been the driver in Olean. And he went into management, became a delivery supervisor in Buffalo. And I loaded the trucks, 3 of the trucks for Bud, 3 of Bud's drivers. And Bud, over time, ended up being the #2 person at UPS. He was the chief operating officer of UPS when he retired. And as he moved up, every time he got promoted, he promoted me. So I was moving up through the ranks at UPS for 13 years. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was the guy that Bud went to and said, "What do you think about this?" And I was the guy that always said, "This is stupid. Why are we doing it this way?" And he said, "Well, how do you think we ought to do it?" And I'd say, "I think we ought to do it this way." And we would implement that. And if it worked, Bud took credit for it. And if it didn't work, he said, "Oh, it's Whalen again. I'll go kick him in the ass." And this went on for 13 years. And suddenly Bud got 2 promotions real quick, and he couldn't move me along anymore with him. So the first meeting he was gone, I worked for another guy. Ironically, his name is Kelvin Darden, also from Buffalo. And Kelvin Darden actually replaced Bud eventually as the #2 person at UPS. So you could imagine this, there's 400-some thousand employees at UPS. And the 2 CEOs in a row were from Buffalo, New York. But Kelvin, at his first meeting, I said, "You know, why are we doing it this way? We're going to do it this way." He says, Kelvin says, "See me after the meeting." So I said, "Okay." I go see him after the meeting in his office. He says, "Bud's not here anymore." I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "That means you can't be a smartass anymore." And I was like, wow, I never thought I was a smartass. But over time, over the next couple of weeks and months, it actually sunk in that I was able to speak my mind, and I was following it clearly. I was following a guy who was a great leader, and he was a great mentor. But with him gone, the game had changed. And that's when I started thinking about leaving UPS. And it was because I just, kind of like Mark, I just couldn't see myself for another, who knows how many years, 20 years, going through the motions of doing something that was just absolutely by the book every day. And UPS is second only to the military probably in doing everything by the book. So anyways, it was because of Bud Yard and the switch that I had this conflict. What do I do? And I decided that there was a lot of reasons for me, obviously, besides to leave. Obviously, there had to be an opportunity that the marketplace presented, and that was really important. But I probably wouldn't have been thinking about that market opportunity if it wasn't for that transition between Bud and Kelvin. And it was clear to me that I was going to lose, my creativity. So I don't know if anybody else has a story that talks about conflict that you had as somebody, a boss you didn't like, or a company you didn't want to work for, or a situation you were in that you couldn't get along anymore, and what did you do about it?
It's a really hard question, and I'll tell you why. Funny you say. I mean, I'm learning things just listening to you say that. It's a hard question because I'm in the public domain. I'm not in the private domain. I'm in the, maybe the military likes to do, but I'm in the public domain. So here's what happens a lot of times. You get into teaching, you have a good time, it's about 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, you hit step 17. In our district, step 17 is the holy grail of steps, right? You make that big pay jump, all right, because we're on steps, right? And then it's year 20, and I get a lot of people who come to see me. Now, I've been with them for a long time, and they say, yeah, I'm ready for a change. Okay, I'm ready for, okay, tell me about it. Like, what do you mean? You want to be an administrator? Do you have your degree? No, I want a job out of the classroom. Okay, doing what? I mean, we don't have a lot of those jobs, we don't have a lot of those jobs. I don't know, maybe like something in security, like, oh, you're a teacher. We don't really have those jobs. So I guess what I've learned, and it happens on the civil service side too, you work hard to get to your spot and your whatever. And you get to 20 years, so I guess the learning I have had from that with the young people, with the people entering, and maybe this is just endemic to public employees because, privately you can move and shift quicker. You have to go with really open eyes for the long haul. Like, you get the job at the beginning, you're happy, but I think when you walk into a company, whatever company it is, I think, I'm thinking about my son who's gonna be an accountant, okay, and he's got all these ideas, but I want him to look what it's gonna look like, not to answer that question, when you wanna be in 10 years, 20 years, what will it look like in your life? What will you want? Will you be happy doing that? Will you not? I mean, you have to kind of project your own personality, your own needs as to what it would look like down the line, because I really can't help many of those teachers who come to me. I just, they figure out I gotta work 13, 15 more years, I have the top step. I like teaching, but I've lost my passion. I know. You gotta get passionate again. I don't know how to make it passionate. You gotta get it, you can't lose it. So I guess the advice is when you're coming into something, you've gotta look beyond just the first couple of years until you get that big pay step. See if you can see yourself there, because if you're in the public sector, it's hard to get out, right? Because you're so vested, you've got years and seniority. If you're in that sector. Now, that'd be totally different because you're your own boss. So I think that the military is somewhat like that, but they can't get out. I mean, they can't leave. They can't leave teaching for 20 years, start a business. So my advice is you got to look a little bit wider down your starting path. That makes sense. And I too was going to be a rapper. But I only lasted 2 weeks. Bill Bob. I knew that.
So you asked, what have you done when you've been with a bad leader? I can't say that I've had, you have some that are maybe have more strengths than other than not. The biggest thing about leadership that I've noticed that I've encountered when I've been a follower or at the liberty of other leaders is almost their misconception of what the leadership is, right? So their inability to connect with the people they're working with, thinking that it's their vision and they're going to drive it home, the pressure that they put on other people but don't know the people. I think the lack of the ability to know who the people are within your systems is a big problem. And one thing I know I did when I was working with somebody who really didn't know the strengths of the people around them, but yet was actually asking them to execute on these plans, was buying some books. And I would just go into the office and I took a chance, I took a risk. I said, hey, can I have a meeting with you today? Can we talk? I was the school counselor at the time, so I was like, I think, have you read the book, The Speed of Trust? How many books do we read that we should actually be reading together when we're in workforce together, and then actually applying the things that we're learning when we do those things. So I can say I've been around various things. I've also hired consultants. I said, look, I know I need a leverage here. I'm not gonna be able to come at the person this way because of the power dynamic. So let me see if we can find a grant, and let me see if we can get a consultant, and then we can mitigate that way. But there are ways when you recognize, I just email. Honestly, I have, somebody said to me once that they admire about me that I have no fear in sending out an email and asking for a real conversation with what my perception and experiences of the situation. And how can we work to make it a little better? What can I do for you to help the company and the organization go in the direction that we know it needs to go, or it's going to fail? And our outcomes aren't where we want them to be. So how are we going to do this? And those are a couple things I have done. And then I leave. And I do, and that's
what I do.
I mean, when people look at my resume, they're probably thinking, well, she was here, she was here, she was there, what's wrong with her? That's the first thing that I notice that people do. And the other thing I notice is when companies are hiring, they're hiring for an impossible employee. I love when I look at the job descriptions, I'm like, so they're looking for somebody that has 31 skills. That is just ridiculous. So there is nobody with 31 skills, and we're actually teaching people not to leverage at that point. And that's again gonna be failed leadership. You're not gonna be able to achieve that in person. So I have to wonder, like, what are we doing?
Talking about the consultants.
Consultant, hiring
Get a grant,
consultant.
get a consultant, so the consultant can tell the boss.
Yes, so then I'm not the bad woman, bad guy. Yeah, we can sit down together and have that conversation with what report they produce.
Interesting.
You know what it makes me think of, like, maybe this is my reflection on my career and my life right now, where I'm at. What they don't teach you as a leader, they teach you about succession planning. You know, I'm learning now, there's an art and a skill in knowing when to leave. Like, knowing when to leave is a skill and an art. Because I can think of, I'm talking about bosses, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but you know those, like, Michael Jordan should not have probably come back and played for the Washington Wizards. He should have left as a Chicago Bull, right? Like, right, so, but I guess, I think maybe it's because I know this is hard to believe, I'm in the autumn of my career, I think. And I know, I really am. I mean, I know I gotta know when to go.
Yes.
I don't want Bobby and Joe and Natalie to say, hey, you should have gone. I wanna
I'll
know.
tell you.
Because then people start telling me, then you become, I don't wanna think about retirement, never. But I wanna know when to go. And I think as a leader, you gotta know when to go before you're told. Because then you start to be careless, and you start to make mistakes, and you start to not give it your all. And I don't think I think that's become a real apparent to me personally, knowing the art. I mean, there's art to leading anything, you know, we go to a party and like, I'm ready to go. You know, it's an art. It's probably the same thing when you know when you gotta give up the business.
It's discipline too, right? It's self-awareness and
Yeah.
discipline.
It's a skill that people don't have, and you're looking like, how are they still here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, in the military, you get people that you figure they should leave and they don't, that are leaders, and if so, that's how, what do you do about it?
So, yeah, it's a little different in the military, but I like the point that Natalie brought up about getting to know your subordinates also. I think that's huge. So in the military, when I was out in the force, I would make it a point at least a minimum once a week to get to talk to my soldiers. And normally it was on Monday, my subordinates, and find out what they were doing, how their weekend was, if they had anything going on in their life, and just getting that buy-in from them. And there's a phrase that says you lead through doors and floors, not through windows. So you have to come out from behind your desk and get down there and talk to the soldiers, the subordinates, and get to know them, right? And I've always heard that, you know, soldiers or service members, they believe what you, or they hear what you say, but they believe what they see. So if they see you down there with them, they're going to respect you if you're doing those jobs out there talking to them.
That's good.
Here, what these days.
Yeah, that is so true.
They believe what you say, they believe what they say.
I've actually been in companies where the CEO and ED could pass 10 of the employees on the road and they would not even know that they're working for that company. To me, that is failed leadership. Absolutely.
Okay, Joe's way ahead, he's got two.
I'm happy to answer both.
I know it's time to leave.
That's good. Mark just retired.
All right, well, I'd like to open it up to questions. People are online. If you're So Klein, raise your hand or send the chat message for anybody in the room.
Just to read down, Stefan, did you
Yes.
answer that question yet? About how?
No, so, my situation is totally different again. Growing up in the restaurant business, back in the early 80s, a Black Chef, you were just a servant. So I'm I thank God that I had the inflictions of always working with someone I was way more talented than. I thought myself in probably a young leader is gonna find themselves behind someone that they're gonna be way more talented than. I tell my young staff here, I said, use your weapon. And their weapon is their youth. Most likely they're gonna outlive the person that they're boss. So their millennial is the youth is their weapon, which they don't use, right? So I always had to win my way to the battle. I just stick short to the battle. So, even in my business now, that saves me on most days. So when the bank tells me no or send me on the long way home, and they do that, but I have room in my heart for one more thing, and that knocks most leaders off the mat. It's that one more thing. They were almost there, and always be one more thing. So I told you I win my way to the battle in most of my promotions. And then somebody didn't tell me that once I won my way to the battle, my reward was, now you got a battle. And that's where I started having a hard time with people. I just didn't understand. Again, I was a people's person that didn't like people. But it was my duty to finish. I became a professional a finisher. I completed my tasks. It wasn't about winning. I had to finish. So it wasn't about a feeling for me. I think most people who follow, they get caught up in their feelings. And for me, what made me very successful, no matter how hard I was treated, no matter how biased I was treated, I always believed that life offered you an equal opportunity experience. We came out with 2 legs. So I was going to outwork you. I had to become faster than you. I had to stay at the restaurant longer than you. And some of my French counterparts didn't understand why the chef was throwing out my lunch when he'd come in the break room. And I thought this was a bad supervisor, a bad leader. And I realized later, most of the bad leaders I thought was great people in my life. So he was shooting up my lunch in the break room to train my taste buds on frog legs, Parmesan tomatoes, and mascarpone cheese, because I came from a place eating fried food, and fried chicken, collard greens, and I had to lose touch with my old self. So I'm careful about knocking someone else's bad off in someone that was a supervisor of me, because I look back at it now, some of the worst, or I thought at the time, bosses was some of my best instruction and learning points.
Thank you. So now, Bobby, you're running a program in the prison. You run a lot of inner city kids, I think, in your high school program, or Starbucks. How do you convey that message to? Because you're not there all the time. You have other people running those operations. And are you able to get them to think the same way?
Well, I think the challenge is like to pour into my people. I like the energy. I go off energy. So I'm doing this multiple facet business now. So, and I was telling Superintendent Laurie, his worry was, well, how can we clone you? I said, well, there's no need, because I can be at 5 places at one time. And he said, how? I just don't stay at one place too long. So it kind of reminds me of like a state trooper comes in your life and he pulls you over. Really intense. So I'm so intense in all my endeavors, all my programs. You know how when those lights come behind you, it's always intense when the police pulls you over, right? Post Black Lives Matter, but so the police pulls you over, I come in your life really intense, and I just don't stay long. And then I love somewhat what a state trooper does. He's really there to help you out. I'm there to help you out, but it just can't stay long because each different business entity needs my personal attention there. So it's 10 toes under the ground. But you can't be at two places at one time. You just can't stay at the same place too long.
That's another good lesson. Okay, questions?
I don't want to monopolize, but can I follow up, start with major? So one of the things that happens when you meet people is, what do you do, right? Well, my curiosity, I'm sure a lot of folks in the room are, why do you do what you do, right? So Simon Sinek, he's an author, he's a motivational guy, he talks about start with why, find your why. So I'd love to hear from down the line, major your why, so why it is that you do what you do. If you have it defined, or if you can maybe try to encapsulate it as best you can from major down, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think he also wrote Leaders Eat Last.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, so I've read those things.
Yeah.
I've read those, and I think for me, it was just to be, serving in the military for one, was just to be part of something bigger than myself.
And I do thank you for your service, by the way, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry.
And I guess most recently, I'm also at the end of my career. I'm winding down. This is gonna be my last assignment here at Niagara University with the ROTC program. And it's almost like I've come full circle, because the cadets that are in our program want to be there. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves, serve their country, serve their nation. You know, we're in an all-volunteer force right now. So it's my way of giving back and just teaching all the leadership lessons, passing that knowledge, that experience down to the younger generation that want to make that commitment. So that, for me, that's my purpose, is to build them up.
Great book. I actually have to teach a whole lesson on that when I go in and work with youth and adults now. So my why is really what I stated at the beginning. So I'm really tapped into my why. My mom said, there is a reason for you to be here. God has a plan for you. You know, I know that maybe you've been told that in your lives, and maybe it means something to you, maybe it doesn't, maybe they're words that pass through. Because of what I've endured, those words mean everything to me. So I have a purpose. So God's purpose is exactly what he's going to show me. And I really am finely tuned. And I would think, you know, there's probably one thing we haven't talked about, but I know, Bobby, you have a strong faith as well. Finally in tune to that, and that is truly my why. And if you talk about the one entity that I follow, it is God. So yeah.
It's amazing, yeah. My faith is everything. That have my higher power, or whatever you choose to call it that, right? So, you know, that's a great question, because I sit here with two of my mentors here today, and it's like when we started this cool program like 3 years ago, and the superintendent had to really take a risk on this. You know, I was like, hey, I got a way that we can eradicate study hall. Instead of the kids going to study hall, we can do this cool program. It can be like this home ec on steroids, you know, and it takes someone like that to really see that, because I'm a forward thinking. And I get the what of it, you know, and I ask my own staff, what, you know, why do you want success? Why do you want the promotion? I get what you need it for. You know, car, house, or home. To me, money is mandatory. We get that. You know, it's just like taking a shower. But the why of it, you know, so what am I going to leave? What am I going to leave behind? You know, what is going to be my legacy, you know, here? You know, so why I do it? Because I didn't start, this is my second half too. I'm 50 years old. And it matters to me that I leave this world a little bit better than I found it. Because I didn't start off so well. So that's for the why of it. And I found out, you know, 7 years I hadn't worked for anyone. And it was a big jump. But that was the first time I jumped with both feet in. I'd been previously, before that, at age 45, I always had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of ideal my whole life. I think that's what making it work for me, because I play offense. I play a different game than I play defense. And the why of it kind of directs me. So anything I do, whether it's doing programs with the Niagara Falls High School systems, and we do some great cool stuff. Like we built, I said, hey, superintendent, I'm gonna build a Starbucks inside of the high school, a real Starbucks. All right, let's go. So what are you gonna do? And you know, I didn't even have the authorization. I didn't have the master. You had to become a master license holder. You know, I flew out to Seattle unannounced. Hey, you know, I'm in the lobby. Blah blah blah. I need to speak to Howard Schwartz. Like, you know, who sent you? You know, hey, you know, my pastor sent me. You know, there you go. Yeah, you know, right, you know, and you know, but this journey was 4 years. So 4 years later, we built the first Starbucks inside of a high school, you know, in the nation. It's the first in the nation. But that takes, you know, vision from the superintendent, and that takes the vision from not me. It was just, okay, how am I leaving this world? You know, how am I to keep these kids soaring way past the lights are off, you know, way past graduation. So my own story was like, couldn't save my own life. Like, it wasn't about, oh, I'm gonna get a career. It was about either go see the judge or you're going to go at this hotel and work. So doing all these cool programs, or doing all this cool, the why of it was about, okay, leaving something, you know, a little bit better than I found it.
That's awesome.
So I'm driven to be an example for my 3 kids. So my father was 46, had cancer, died. I saw him go to work every day, sick. He went to work every day. I can never say I can't go to work. So I haven't taken a sick day in 16 years. I would refuse to do it. And I saw that man go to work that way. And I want to model that for my 3 kids, which, you know, are turning out okay. It meets some of my personal egotistical needs when I do things. To be honest with you, I really get pleasure out of doing what he just said, being able to do that, being able to open that up. And finally, it's because I think public education, I believe in it, I was raised in it, but I think it's on the wrong path. I'm trying to change it. It is dead. It's dying. I think that's the only hope, is to open up a Starbucks in there, and to open up a carpentry shop in there, and then open up a electrician shop in there. And so I'm just trying to get through that. You know, I think about how I'm gonna close, that would probably be my close. But that's what drives me to change public education for the way it should be. That's why, you know, talking about bosses, the state education department is missing such an opportunity. They shouldn't be talking about COVID plans now, we can figure that out. They should be reformatting high school education right now.
Oh, if I could.
They should
Oh,
be
let's clap.
What the hell did they do?
Yes.
Let's change it now. I mean, this is a great time, and we're missing the opportunity. So I can't I think I have an obligation not to let you miss here. But public education is friendly with inertia, and it's a slow-moving thing. So inertia is our enemy. It's our enemy in public education. That's what is kind of driving me to move that at a more rapid speed.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna jump off of the last question. So we've heard of your passions and why you do what you do. And we probably all have that out here, why we do what we do sitting out here. But, so thinking of being a follower, so I'm a follower, I have a boss, or I have superiors of some sort. I have these ideas, I have passion, I'm going, you know, every day, and I'm hitting my head against a brick wall every freaking day. Am I not asking the right questions? Am I not saying it the right way? Or do I reach a point, or have you ever reached a point where you're just, you know what? Okay, I can't beat my head against the wall anymore. I gotta go do something, maybe not something entirely different, but I need to go work for somebody else because this is not working for me. I know that's maybe a hard question to answer, but you know, what would you say? Have you ever had that kind of situation where you had the passion and it seemed like, whether it's state ed, who will not let you, you know, get to where you want to be, and I totally get that. I worked in higher ed at UB and teacher education, and I was a former teacher myself, so I get that. What do you do as a follower that has passion and you want to go?
So, I mean, my biggest example I have is when I was working with Indigo, and now with my own company, Your Endgame, really, I don't stop. And really what stops me is bad leadership and a bad plan that exists within the structure, within the system. So really what happens is when things get stopped, it's the system that doesn't want to stop and take an innate look at itself and say, you know, what could we be doing better? More people operate a plan than understand how to innovate when you're operating a plan. And I also think part of that is when you get into the hiring process, like you're in academia, military, sometimes what ends up happening is you're hiring, you have these echo chambers that live around you, right? So you have echo chambers that keep the plans in place, and they're afraid to go outside and challenge that plan because everybody sits around and likes the plan. And it's not a fault. It's just what naturally, innately happens when we're not mindful of strength in diversity of behavior, and diversity in thought, and diversity in perception. I think what you have to do when you hit those walls is you have to say, you have to ask your boss for a meeting, maybe point out some of these things, like write these, I mean, that's what I've done. And as far as Your Endgame goes, I'm not gonna stop. I mean, my business partner and I are gonna continue to plug ahead with every wall we hit, and I will continue to hit walls, especially in New York State, because New York State does not, like Mark is saying, it's very difficult to have a paradigm shift within education. And the conversation, the iron's hot now. They're not, this isn't what they're talking about. But we don't talk about even what I just talked about and how you end up hitting your head against the wall. Like you have to talk about how did that end up happening, you know, within the system structure itself. I don't think we give that enough thought, time, attention, and understanding in general.
I think you have to put yourself in different situations, like come here, I mean, go to different, like, I mean, you gotta hit the right door. You gotta be true to yourself and your needs, you gotta find the right door, just maybe, that's why, so I keep thinking sometimes, I'm like, what, I could be home, be ready for the World Series. Why do I do this or something else? Every time I think, oh my God, I met Bob, I didn't know. And I met him at one of these things, you know, and it changed our relationship, personally, professionally, and for the good of kids. So I kept putting myself out there in different places with different groups of people until you found a symbiotic match. It's out there. I just don't think you can't stop going and looking for it. And like, I keep thinking, I waste, you know, my time on it. And then I'll think, I'll never forget this one. I went to some meeting at the county. What am I doing here? They broke us into groups. I'm like, I'm trying to get out of here a little bit. This girl was standing there. She worked for the American Heart Association. And I know a little bit about that. She started talking to me about dinner programs. Like, you know, you can get funding for dinner in school. Like, dinner, I never thought of that. So we started giving dinner to kids at ed. We got reimbursed for it. We had money. I mean, it was just going somewhere. Low expectations. She's telling me about, you can pay for it this way. And I'm like, wow, it was worth this 2-hour ride. It just happened. You know, why am I here? I mean, we kind of met that same way, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to be judgmental against any other school district or other location, Buffalo, but I think that that's what happened with us, right?
Yes, yeah.
You're always on the go.
It's like
Accidental collisions.
I think the passion too, like for me as an entrepreneur, as a self-sufficient, you know, you just described 99% of America, of the world. The 1% though, what we do is we set our face. Come hell or high water, you're getting on this boat. So when you hit the brick wall, for me, the prison is the poem. The mere fact that when you tell me no, now it's the start of the sail.
Yes.
It's the mere fact that I run into a problem, there's a bridge being built for me. The mere fact that you know, you told me no on something that I wanted, I have room in my entrepreneurial heart for one more no after that. and then one more no after that. But the 1%, what we do is when we come into a roadblock or I don't even call it a problem, it's called a situation. We understand that's the start of the sale, that's the start of something. But it doesn't take, I haven't met probably anyone who was incredibly successful, wasn't flying over some type of storm as we speak. So, you know, your block, when you hit what you call a block, I call feathers. So, in the business sense. So, a lot of times when I was doing business, I went depressed. I went lonely. I went not for sure myself. You know, I had other issues going, but I had one wing, but I still went. I still believed in that. So I think that's the key. Come hell or high water, you get none. But it's not a microwave world. You know, that took so long. And your brain is so smart and so it'll rationalize why this is crazy, this is stupid. I'm smart, I'm a chef, I was making $2,000 a week, bring home, you know. I'm working for, you know, the biggest outfit in Buffalo. You can just go ride the wave. And your brain, that's what Steve Jobs liked to call it. You know, your brain is rationalizing. That's why you better find something that you'll jump out of the bed and be excited by going. I love Sunday night because I'm pregnant over the weekend. I can't wait for Monday to come. I'm pregnant like deals. I can't wait. And that's the passion you need. Yeah, that's it out of me. John.
I have a question that pertains to something that Chef Bobby brought up about a supervisor throwing away your lunch. And then I thought about it again when Mark brought up Michael Jordan, because I watched that documentary too, and he was a jerk to everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if being a leader and being like hard ass is mutually exclusive. And if any of you have an experience with being that person and having to give tough love, and if it is mutually exclusive, how can one become better at kind of dealing with that type of confrontation?
I don't think you have to be hard. I think you have to explain the whys all the time, and then people are supposed to be ticked off at you. So when I was a young administrator, it used to drive me crazy. I'd have like itchy skin all the time. I'm nervous because somebody didn't like me. And then as I got older, it didn't bother me as much. Now I really don't care. I don't care. You always care. Don't ever say you don't care. You care. So I mean, I don't think fear gets it done. I think that it's like, I don't think that being a hard ass only works for a short period of time, because then what do you do when they don't do it? So I think it's a lot of explaining the whys and using the what question. That's what I try to do. Sometimes people just need to know why your decision was your decision. And it helps. And then I try to get into conflict, and I do try to do two things. What is it that you want here? What are you trying to do? I try to only ask what questions. My job, never why, because then that takes you through history. How come? I just want to know, what is it you want? And then I learned something from my oldest son, who was really very difficult to raise. He's a teacher on the side. Very difficult to raise. Because what he did to me, well, I didn't realize it as a young father. I didn't realize what he was doing. So if he didn't like my decision, he would make me into a long conversation to find a weakness in my argument. Right? Wait, no, this is the, now he doesn't really want to, right? But, you know, I think as a parent, I learned this is the decision, this is why, and this is what we're moving on. Okay, that's it. Have a nice day. You're going to go. But he would like, but the people that work with you, they'll try and catch you on something, right? And then well, hang on. I had this revelation Sunday night. Tried to do a webinar. I recently had to share information about COVID in the school district. Sunday hit me like, I'm oversharing because they're taking what they're hearing and they're framing it. I'm going to back off a couple weeks and not do this. I was oversharing, I thought. I was trying to be over communicative, you know, like, I get a lot of praise, you're communicating, that's great, but I felt Sunday night, I was over communicating, over explaining, and I just thought, you know, they're gonna get a little less than me right now. They need to know enough, so it's the why, it's saying what you have to say and getting out of it, and asking the what question, that it helps me. And I don't think you can leave with people at all, I do not think you can do. It's like, okay, after you do this, what do you?
I also think too, like Michael Jordan, that's perception too.
Uh-huh.
Because Michael Jordan is a dominant person that really wants to win, highly competitive and very dominant, right? If you build relationships first, I think there is a door for you to be dominant and aggressive and competitive and still have the influence you need to get to where the goal is, right? So I think if we understand behaviors more, and this, at the same time, some leadership development within your behaviors, right? So if you are a dominant person, what does the overuse of dominance look like? And how do you recognize when you're getting there and then pull back? Because you are right, like there'll be a point where there is a breakdown of wanting to follow that person if they start to overuse their strengths. And there's a realness in that. There are strengths to Michael Jordan. The guy produced how many national titles? You can't deny that he's a genius at what he does. And what he did, right? So.
Yeah. That's the difference, he was the greatest.
Right.
Arguably, he could get away with it, because
Yeah.
I don't think I'm the greatest
Good example.
superintendent anywhere, but he was. And it was also 1997, the world was different.
It was different. You let things go.
So we got about 10 minutes, and we do have a question in the chat, and I think it's a good segue into it, because the question is, what are employees like today compared to 20 years ago when you were, now that you're a leader? What do you see in place today that you didn't see when you were a follower, and vice versa? Any advice for our younger?
Get involved. I think people get things come easier to them. I think our brains have been wired to be an instant gratification society. We're an instant gratification society, so people's brains are wired that way because of technology. Right? So everything comes to everybody quickly and easily. You know, the work is hard, like these people did, to get to where they're going. So when it doesn't happen to them, they're like, oh, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because it didn't come easy to me, right? My own 3 kids, 3 things. My oldest son likes movies. He can find a movie before it's even released because he can write or something on the screen. Same to him like that. He's not gonna wait for it to come out. My daughter likes clothes. She wants a dress. It's in the mailbox that afternoon. She gets a lunch. My other son likes to eat. And we go to a nice restaurant. We're there for 5 minutes. He's like, well, what kind of a place is this? What's the matter? He's like, where's the food? We've been here for 5 minutes. It's not how, but that's how their brains are wired. That's how everybody's wired now, I think. And so it's an entitled, quick, instant gratification world.
Microwave.
And it's just hard to find those people. So they have to get involved. Like, they gotta get involved. Like, even coaches and clubs and things, nobody wants to do those anymore. Like, I'm dying to be a coach or run a club. Just teach my job and go home. But get involved in your business. Who wants to volunteer to be on the board at the Y or wherever the boards are? Nobody. Well, they're all old white men. You know what I'm saying? Get involved. That's what I see.
When I, you know, as a leader, when I walk in the door, there's a bit of controversy comes with me. You gotta be okay with that as a leader. I'll never forget, I was in a school at Gaskill. I was wondering why all the teachers were so nice and everybody was really like, the rooms, the hallway, all the superintendents in the building. And it wasn't ruling out fear. You know, it wasn't out of fear, because I make decisions as an owner now for the whole. So you're not gonna agree as an employee or a supervisor with my 360-degree decision. And that's what it really be. I'm making decisions for 360. Most of the employees they're making 90-degree decisions. So when I walk in the door, there's a bit of controversy with me, and it's not about fear. Like, we just had a discussion about the old days, right? 20 years ago, it's a new workforce development because we train it, right? You know, pull your pants up, firm handshake, look someone in the eye. Like when I worked in the hospitality business, I really wanted to please my boss. I really wanted to show off the next shelf and show how good I was to my boss. I think that lackadaisical in the workforce in itself just changed completely. Like, they just think, oh, I'm here, I showed up, I'm smart, I'm brilliant, if you don't like it, maybe my parents have some money. I think, right? And I think, like, for me, setting my sons up for success is giving them the same thing that what made me successful. And it wasn't my money, it was the hard work. And I think even second, third generations are getting away from it. I think they're giving the kids everything but what really made them successful. And it really wasn't the money, it was that work ethic. So that's what I see change.
How about in the service, if I skip Natalie for a minute?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate because we're trying to instill a lot of those values in our cadets. So the innovation, the team building, decision making, the creative thinking, but it really goes back to that why, like you were saying, the why is what they want to know. So I had two of those bosses in my career. When I messed up, I went to see my boss and he just ate my lunch. He got into my face, yelled at me, and I knew I was never gonna make that mistake again. He was replaced by another boss. When I got in trouble, I went to see him and he said, "Sit down, Joe, let me tell you why you can't do this." And he would explain, he would give me the purpose. And both effective, and I think they're both needed in the military, but we didn't want to let the first one down, the second one down, and I didn't want to get yelled at again. And going back to your definition of leadership, it's very similar to the military, the Army definition. Influencing others by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission or task and improve the organization. So you have to give them some kind of direction, you have to motivate them, but then you also have to provide the purpose and tell them why. So if my team is staying late on Friday night while everybody else is going home, if I tell them why, because we have a VIP coming Monday morning, if you give them that reason why, they're more inclined to follow and say, okay, now I know what it is. I have a sense of purpose here for this mission. So.
Absolutely. Incredible. Yeah. I just real quick, what I would give advice to kids would be, whenever you have the opportunity, increase your depth of self-awareness. Work on saying yes to things and exposing yourself to what's out in the community and take advantage of those opportunities to grow your network. Definitely when you figure out what your purpose is and what your skill sets are, hone in on them. Take the classes. So if you know that you are somebody that likes to influence lots of people, take public speaking. Take relevant courses to increase your skill sets, that you recognize what your top 5 skill sets are. You are not everything, you're not gonna be everything, but you have to understand what you are and own those. And purposefully design that, which comes with increased self-awareness. And yes, recognize that it's not going to happen in a microwave. This is a slow roasting process to achieve, and then go live it. And always ask for help. I mean, remain humble. Recognize that whatever your skill sets are, somebody else compliments you. And reach out to them and ask them everything you need help with. That is not a sign of weakness. And I think too often kids believe if they ask for help, they think they're stupid or they're embarrassed, they self-preserve. It's not true. We all need help. We should all be asking for help. And we're remiss and not humble if we don't do that. So those would be the advice to use.
So I thought I'd have the last word, but you really just said it. Ask for help. I think that's really important. A lot of people don't do it. I want to tell a story about Bobby because he just said he went to Seattle and went to ask for the founder of Starbucks. And I know he did that because the day I met Bobby, I was the chief operating officer of Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. I'm on the telephone and Bobby walks into my office. And I said, excuse me, Jim, you're gonna finish my call. I hang up. He says, are you paying my order? I said, yeah. He said, I need a mentor, and I was told you're a good mentor. I said, I gotta go to a meeting. Can you make an appointment, please? Okay. But when we finally did sit down, he told me all the things he wanted to do. I've been a celebrity chef. And I want to do all these things that just not getting there. I need help. I need help. not a bad thing to say you need help. And, my only advice was focus, do one thing, get it done, put it to bed, maintain it, do the next thing, instead of trying to do 14 things at once. And today, it's, and somebody asks why you do what you do, there's a good reason why I do what I do. I was a successful guy today, and it's because Manuel told me to focus. Thanks, everybody.